Gregory Lancaster thought rules protected his world, until one Christmas night his daughter nearly died because no one dared to break them. And the only one who did was the black nanny he barely noticed. Snow fell softly over Beverly Hills, frosting the glass walls of the Lancaster estate. Outside, the world shimmered with carols and Christmas lights. Inside, silence stretched like an endless corridor. The mansion gleamed with wealth, towering fir trees trimmed in silver, fireplaces roaring with imported wood, but warmth was nowhere to be found. Gregory, a billionaire who treated emotions like liabilities, had already left for Zurich that week. Staff moved briskly through the hallways, polishing chandeliers and arranging poinsettias. None of them checked the second floor, where 10-year-old Vivien lay pale and trembling, her breaths shallow, her lips cracked. And then, footsteps. Quiet, hesitant, almost apologetic. Tasha Briggs, the new nanny, carrying a breakfast tray. She opened the door and froze. Vivien was collapsed halfway off the bed, her fragile body fighting itself from the inside. "Tasha," the girl whispered, barely audible. Downstairs, laughter from the staff echoed like nothing was wrong. But here, in the hushed room heavy with Christmas garlands and fear, one woman realized she had no time to wait for permission. Tasha set the tray down, heart pounding, and looked at the locked office at the end of the hall. The rules said, "Stay out." But Vivien's life said, "Break them." Gregory Lancaster had not always been the man people whispered about. Aloof, untouchable, frozen like the marble floors of his Beverly Hills estate. Years earlier, he was a husband who laughed easily, a father who once knelt to tie his daughter's shoelaces beneath a twinkling Christmas tree. But grief carved him into someone unrecognizable. When Eleanor, his beloved wife, died of leukemia on a bitter December morning, something inside Gregory turned to stone. He poured himself into business, convincing himself that fortune would shield him from further pain. His empire stretched across 5 countries, his name synonymous with innovation and wealth. Yet at home, silence reigned. The Christmas carols that once filled their mansion ceased. The stockings that Eleanor hung with care every year stayed boxed in the attic. Gregory told himself he was too busy, that holidays were distractions. In truth, he could not bear to look at what was missing. Vivien, only 6 when her mother passed, carried the heaviest burden. Her rare sickle cell disease left her frail, her body a battlefield she never chose. Tutors rotated through, doctors adjusted prescriptions, but love could not be prescribed. She lingered in her upstairs sunroom, wrapped in sweaters, gazing through frosted windows at other children building snowmen in the yard. Sometimes she pressed her hand to the glass, whispering "Mommy" into the cold pane, though no one heard. Her father never noticed. He was already on the next plane, the next deal, the next boardroom. While Gregory fled from his ghosts, Tasha Briggs was running from her own. Orphaned young, she grew up in foster care, moving from house to house with a trash bag carrying all her belongings. Christmas for her was often a night in a shelter or a foster home that smelled of strangers. She tied her shoelaces tight, not because they were loose, but because she never knew when she'd be told to leave again. She once dreamed of becoming a nurse, someone who could ease suffering, someone who mattered. But without stability, she couldn't afford college. Instead, she became what the world offered: cleaner, babysitter, caretaker. She traded her dream for survival, yet she never lost her tenderness. During the holidays, while others rushed to family dinners, Tasha volunteered at soup kitchens, slipping toys into the hands of children whose eyes looked too much like hers in the mirror. When she arrived at the Lancaster estate, the other staff whispered she was too soft for the job. They were right in one sense. Tasha noticed things they ignored: the shuffle of Vivien's feet, the way her smile cracked like fragile paint, the tremors in her hands that spoke of pain no one addressed. To Tasha, Vivien was not just an employer's child, but a lonely girl, clinging to life, the way Tasha once clung to hope. Gregory, though, had built his fortress of rules. His office was off limits. His systems were absolute. To him, order was protection. If no one broke the rules, then nothing could collapse again. He believed walls of glass, of wealth, of iron protocols could prevent another loss. But within those walls, grief multiplied. Gregory lost touch with his daughter. Vivien lost her childhood. And Tasha, though only days into her employment, felt the ache of a house where love had been exiled. That December, as snowflakes dusted the marble driveway and Christmas lights blinked emptily against the dark, 3 lives moved in silence. A father who had buried his heart, a child who had never known warmth since her mother's death, and a nanny who still believed, against all odds, that miracles could be born from brokenness. None of them knew the storm was coming, a storm that would force them to confront not just rules, but the cost of refusing to love. The first true meeting between Tasha and Vivien happened not in words, but in silence. It was the 4th morning of her employment. Snow drifted lazily beyond the mansion windows, the estate decorated with garlands and poinsettias, yet inside, the atmosphere remained cold and clinical. Tasha carried a tray of warm oatmeal, gingerbread cookies, and tea. Holiday touches she thought might coax the child to eat. She knocked softly. No answer. When she pushed the door open, her breath caught. Vivien was curled on the floor beside her bed, her small frame trembling. For a heartbeat, Tasha froze, uncertain if she should shout for help. But instinct told her the girl needed presence, not panic. She set the tray down and quietly lowered herself onto the floor, crossing her legs beside the child. Minutes passed in stillness. Finally, Vivien whispered, "It hurts today." Tasha's throat tightened. She nodded, placing a gentle hand near, not on, the girl's arm, giving her space. "I know," she said softly. That simple acknowledgement seemed to lift a fraction of the invisible weight pressing on the child. For the first time in years, someone was not ordering, not ignoring, not prescribing. Someone was simply with her. From that day, small changes began. Tasha wove warmth into the cold routines of the Lancaster estate. She strung paper snowflakes with Vivien, humming faint Christmas carols while the girl listened quietly. She baked gingerbread in the staff kitchen, sneaking pieces upstairs to share. She brought stories, old fairy tales, Bible verses about hope, even silly rhymes she remembered from foster homes. Vivien never laughed outright, but her lips sometimes twitched, the corners daring to lift. Downstairs, the staff whispered that the new nanny was wasting her time. "The girl doesn't talk, doesn't smile, best not to get attached," they muttered. But Tasha had lived her entire life craving the very things Vivien lacked: attention, affection, consistency. She couldn't help but give them freely. The first sign of hope came one snowy afternoon. Tasha brought in a small pine branch from the garden, set it in a vase in Vivien's sunroom, and hung 2 ornaments she had carried since childhood: a cracked glass bauble and a tin star. They were all she had kept through years of moving. Vivien stared at the ornaments for a long time. Then, to Tasha's shock, she whispered, "Pretty." It was one word. Fragile, barely audible. But for Tasha, it was everything. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. She smiled and said, "Yes, sweetheart, very pretty." That night, as the snow thickened outside and carols floated faintly from a neighbor's house, Vivien did something she hadn't done in years. She took out her crayons and drew a picture: a tree covered in stars, a small figure standing beside a taller one. When Tasha asked, "Who's this?" Vivien hesitated before answering, "Me and you." The drawing wasn't elaborate, But it was a seed of hope. Tasha carefully pinned it on the wall, right beneath the twinkling fairy lights she'd strung across the sunroom windows. Gregory, busy flying between boardrooms, didn't notice these shifts. To him, Christmas remained a distraction. His daughter's illness, another line item managed by doctors. But behind the frosted windows of his mansion, something he had long considered impossible was happening. A broken child was beginning to trust. A grieving orphan was beginning to heal through giving. Neither of them knew that this fragile hope would soon be tested by a crisis that demanded everything. But for now, in the quiet glow of Christmas lights, two souls who had always felt unseen found each other. The Lancaster estate glittered like a palace that December, its marble staircases wrapped in garlands and golden bows, its trees shimmering with imported ornaments. To the outside world, Gregory Lancaster was hosting the most anticipated holiday gala in Beverly Hills. But inside, cracks were spreading, hairline fractures in the perfect facade. Tasha's quiet bond with Vivien had begun to draw notice. The girl, who once hid in her sunroom, now reached for Tasha's hand when she walked through the corridors. She whispered to her nanny at dinner, ignoring the chef's carefully plated meals until Tasha coaxed her with gingerbread crumbs. Staff who had once dismissed the new nanny now watched her with narrowed eyes. "She acts like the child is hers," one scoffed in the laundry room. Another muttered, "Mark my words, she's angling for more than wages." Even Gregory noticed. One night, arriving late from a trip, he paused outside the sunroom. Through the crack in the door, he saw Vivien resting against Tasha's shoulder, eyes half closed, her breathing even. For the first time in years, his daughter looked safe, but suspicion stirred rather than comfort. What power does this woman hold? He wondered. Rules existed for a reason. Rules kept chaos at bay. At the Christmas gala, murmurs sharpened into gossip. A sharp-eyed investor's wife whispered near the champagne fountain, "The child clings to that black nanny more than her own father. Imagine the headlines if people think she's replacing her mother." Gregory overheard. He smiled tightly, but inside, the words stung. Still, nothing could mask Vivien's decline. On Christmas Eve morning, storm clouds pressed low over Beverly Hills. The mansion bustled with staff rushing to prepare for a dinner party scheduled after the holiday. But upstairs, Vivien was struggling to breathe. Tasha found her collapsed on the floor, sweat soaking her sweater, lips pale as wax. Panic surged. She ran to the hallway phone. Gregory's number rang endlessly. She tried the nurse's line. Voicemail. She shouted to the maids downstairs. "Vivien needs a hospital." One rolled her eyes. "We'll inform the estate manager. That's the process." Another added coldly, "Staff don't go upstairs without clearance." Clearance. Process. Words that meant nothing as the girl gasped for air. Tasha's fists clenched. She turned and sprinted down the hall. Her eyes locked on the forbidden door, Gregory's private office. For weeks, she had cleaned nearby, noting the red-tagged key in the basement that read, "Do not remove." Now she tore it free. The lock clicked. Inside, polished leather, framed awards, and silence. On the desk, a Tesla key fob, a stack of $100 bills, the gleam of power guarded from everyone but Gregory himself. Rules screamed, "Stop." But Vivien's shallow breaths screamed louder. Tasha scooped the child into her arms, trembling under the weight. She buckled her into the Tesla's white leather seat, whispered, "Hold on, baby," and slammed the accelerator. Snow blurred past. Behind them, alarms howled through the mansion. Security screens lit red. Unauthorized access. Office breach. Vehicle missing. Within minutes, 2 black SUVs sped after her. By the time she screeched into the hospital's emergency lane, Vivien's head lolled, lips blue. Tasha carried her inside, shouting, Please, she has sickle cell. She can't breathe. Nurses rushed the girl onto a gurney, wheeling her away. And then, silence. Tasha stood alone in the lobby, chest heaving, hands shaking. She had broken every rule to save a child, and for that, guards stormed in, slapped cuffs on her wrists, and accused her of theft and kidnapping. Gregory arrived 15 minutes later, fury written across his face. "Where is my daughter?" he demanded. Security answered coldly. "Stable, for now. The maid is in holding. She stole your cash and vehicle." But then the doctor appeared, mid-50s, composed, unafraid of Gregory's wealth. "Mr. Lancaster," he said firmly, "your daughter has sickle cell. In a crisis, minutes matter. If this young woman hadn't acted when she did, Vivien would have died." The word died echoed like thunder. Gregory's jaw tightened, but doubt cracked through his armor. Still, scandal was already raging. Reporters swarmed outside. Headlines lit up phones across the city. Black nanny arrested for stealing Billionaire's car. Possible kidnapping. Inside the holding room, Tasha sat cuffed, shoulders rigid. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She stared at the wall, haunted but unafraid. She had broken rules, yes, but rules had never saved a child's life. Gregory, pacing in the corridor, felt the weight of choices he had made. Rules above love, appearance above presence. For the first time in years, he wondered whether his fortress of order had nearly cost him the one person he couldn't afford to lose. Snow pressed against the hospital windows, muffling the chaos outside. Christmas Eve had arrived, but inside, nothing felt holy. Love and betrayal blurred together, leaving Gregory at a crossroads he had long refused to face. The world outside the hospital glowed with Christmas cheer, but inside, the night was anything but merry. Reporters crowded the gates, their breath misting in the cold air, cameras flashing like fireworks. Headlines had already spun the story into scandal. Black nanny steals billionaire's car. Possible kidnapping attempt. To strangers scrolling their phones, Tasha Briggs was a criminal. Only those inside the sterile hospital walls knew she was the reason a 10-year-old girl was still alive. Gregory Lancaster paced the corridor like a caged animal. His empire had always thrived on order, on rules that bent the world to his will. But tonight, rules had failed. His daughter had nearly died while his staff clung to procedure, and the only one who dared to break the chain was the woman now shackled in a holding room. He finally stepped inside. Tasha sat upright on the metal chair, her wrists raw from the cuffs, her eyes hollow yet unbroken. For a long moment, neither spoke. Gregory's voice came out hoarse. "You broke into my office. You stole money. You took my car. Do you realize the chaos you've caused?" Tasha lifted her chin, unflinching. "Do you realize your daughter couldn't breathe? Do you realize no one else moved? I didn't steal your wealth, Mr. Lancaster. I borrowed time, because time was the only thing Vivien didn't have." Her words landed like stones in his chest. For years, Gregory had surrounded himself with people who obeyed, who never questioned. And here was a woman who had defied everything he built to save what he loved most. Slowly, he pulled a small silver key from his pocket. The handcuffs clicked open. "She's asking for you," he whispered. In room 214, the beeping of machines steadied with each passing second. Vivien lay under soft, blue blankets, a tiny Christmas tree glowing faintly by the window. When Tasha entered, the girl's lips curved faintly. "Tasha?" she whispered, her weak fingers reaching out. The nanny bent quickly, clasping her hand, whispering soothing words. Gregory stood back, watching. For years, his daughter had barely spoken, retreating into silence. Now she reached for this woman, this stranger, like she had been waiting for her all along. Shame burned in him, sharper than grief. He had failed his wife's last wish, to see their daughter, and the person he nearly had arrested had done what he could not. By morning, the media storm raged fiercer. Talk shows questioned Tasha's motives. Was it desperation? Was she after money? Socialites whispered about the nanny-to-wife pipeline. Staff at the estate muttered about betrayal. Public opinion split. Villain to some, hero to others. Gregory's advisors urged him to cut ties. Distance yourself, Mr. Lancaster. Fire her quietly. Protect your reputation. But reputation had nearly cost him his daughter's life. He stared at the frost on the window and knew silence was cowardice. That evening, as snow drifted gently over Beverly Hills, the Lancaster gates opened. A press conference had been announced, and the world held its breath. Floodlights illuminated the mansion, casting long shadows over the marble columns wrapped in garlands. Reporters surged forward. Gregory appeared, not in his corporate armor, but in a simple dark coat. His jaw was tight, his eyes shadowed from sleepless hours. And beside him stood Tasha Briggs, no longer in a maid's uniform but in a pressed gray dress, her hands trembling slightly as cameras flashed. "My daughter nearly died on Christmas Eve," Gregory began, his voice carrying across the frozen lawn. "And the only reason she is alive tonight is because of the woman standing beside me." The crowd stilled. Yes, she broke rules. Yes, she entered my office, took my car, and used money without permission. But when everyone else hesitated, when my staff, my security, even I failed, she acted. She ran. She saved my child. Tasha Briggs is not a criminal. She is the reason my daughter is alive. Gasps rippled. Microphones thrust closer. Shutters clicked like thunder. Gregory raised a hand, steady. "Effective immediately, Tasha will never again serve as a maid in my household. She will oversee the Lancaster Medical Outreach Foundation, built in my daughter's name, to ensure children like Vivien receive the help they need before it's too late. Because no rule, no fortune, should ever outweigh a child's life." Tasha's eyes glistened. She had expected dismissal, perhaps even jail. Instead, she stood acknowledged, honored in front of the very world that once dismissed her. But the real miracle came not from the flashing cameras outside, but from the quiet hospital room later that night. Snow drifted gently past the window, blanketing the city in silence. Tasha sat beside Vivien, stroking her hair. Gregory lingered at the door, his heart raw, stripped bare. Vivien stirred, her lips parting. In the hush of Christmas Eve, she whispered a word not heard in years, a word that carried more power than any empire. "Mommy!" Tasha gasped, tears streaming freely. She leaned down, kissing the girl's forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart," she whispered, voice trembling. Gregory turned away, shoulders shaking. His fortress of rules had fallen. Love had broken through. For the first time since Eleanor's death, he felt something stir in his chest. Not grief, not fear, but hope. On that snowy Christmas Eve, a billionaire found humility, a child found her voice, and a nanny found her place as family. The truth had been revealed. The miracle was never in the wealth, but in the courage to love. Snow still lay soft over Beverly Hills, glittering like sugar in the pale morning light. Inside the Lancaster mansion, the usual bustle of staff and clinking of silver trays was gone. Gregory had dismissed most of the employees for the holidays. For the first time in years, the estate was quiet. Not with loneliness, but with peace. In the sunroom, Vivien sat wrapped in a blanket, cheeks flushed with a fragile glow that hadn't been there in months. A small Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, its branches heavy with gingerbread ornaments she had decorated with Tasha. Beside her, Tasha hummed a carol as she braided the girl's hair, fingers gentle, steady, practiced from years of caring for others. "Don't leave me," Vivien whispered, her voice still thin but steadier than before. Tasha leaned down, kissed the top of her head, and answered, "Sweetheart, I'm here for good." Gregory, standing quietly in the doorway, felt something shift in his chest. For so long, he had believed money could shield him from pain, that rules could protect him from loss. But here, watching his daughter rest safely against Tasha's side, he saw what had truly saved them: love, sacrifice, courage. That evening, the three of them shared dinner at the long mahogany table where Gregory had eaten alone for years. There were no investors, no catered platters, no fine wines, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and gingerbread cookies dusted with sugar. Vivien giggled when she dropped frosting on the tablecloth, and instead of scolding, Gregory laughed with her, the sound rusty but real. Halfway through the meal, Vivien reached across the table, her small hand landing atop her father's. "Daddy," she said, a word he hadn't heard from her in years. His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He placed his other hand gently over hers. "I'm here," he whispered. His eyes met Tasha's, and he realized he was speaking to them both. The days that followed wove healing into their routines. Tasha didn't just care for Vivien. She became part of every corner of the mansion. She filled the once empty halls with the smell of baking, the sound of soft carols, the warmth of her laughter. Gregory found himself slowing down, pausing work calls to sit with his daughter, to listen when she spoke, to be present instead of absent. Public scrutiny still swirled. Tabloids speculated, society gossiped. Some questioned Gregory's decision to place Tasha at the head of the newly founded Lancaster Medical Outreach Foundation. But Gregory no longer lived for appearances. At a press follow-up, he answered simply, "She saved my daughter. She saved me." And that was enough. On New Year's Eve, the three of them stood on the balcony, bundled in coats, as fireworks bloomed over Los Angeles. The sky shimmered with red and gold, and the city roared with celebration. Vivien nestled between them, her tiny hands gripping both of theirs. "We look like a family," she declared. Gregory and Tasha glanced at each other, startled by her innocence, then smiled. Neither corrected her, because it was true. The final miracle came one quiet January morning. The Christmas decorations had been packed away, the tree taken down, the mansion settling back into its rhythm. In the sunroom, as Tasha brushed through Vivien's curls, the child whispered again, "Mommy." This time, her voice carried no hesitation, only certainty. Tasha froze, her heart pounding, tears springing to her eyes. She bent low, hugging the girl tight. "I'm here, sweetheart," she whispered through trembling lips. Gregory, listening from the hallway, didn't turn away this time. He let the tears fall freely, each one washing away a piece of the ice he had carried for years. He knew Eleanor would never be replaced, but he also knew she would want this. For her daughter to be loved, for her husband to rediscover his heart. The Lancaster mansion, once a fortress of cold rules, had become a home again. Its marble halls echoed not with emptiness, but with laughter and music. Wealth still surrounded them, but for the first time, it wasn't the center of their lives. Family was, and as snow melted into spring, Gregory, Tasha, and Vivien walked forward. Not as employer and employee, not as broken souls bound by tragedy, but as a family born of a Christmas miracle. Because in the end, it wasn't money that saved them. It was love.